going to the teddy bear shop.
Come on then. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, marvellous. Oh my goodness. Look at my coat. Look at my coat. Yes. I was admiring my own coat. Oh, of course. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Do come in and join us here in the 16th century. That's a pleasure. If anybody would like a little introduction to the house before you go through, you are very, very welcome to have it. Of course. This is my big moment. If you would rather stroll directly into the 16th century, do please feel free. Within a minute after my celebrity moment, I shall be talking again about the 16th century. So in a few moments, when you step through into that first main room, you're actually inside the Shakespeare family home. Where we are now, where we begin, this was the house next door. This was a separate little cottage in William Shakespeare's time, with the emphasis on the word little, as you can see, just one up, one down. Room here, room above us, there's a staircase over there, now behind a wooden door. But at that time, the only way in and out of this little cottage was the front door, which is over there in the corner. Living here, you'd step straight out onto Henley Street. No door there that we're all coming through today, because there was another house on the other side of this one. What has changed most dramatically over the last 448 years since William Shakespeare was born here is it now looks as if he grew up in a big detached house. But that is an illusion that's been created by the fact everything either side has disappeared. So in his day, we essentially would have been just in a terrace of these rather lovely timber framed houses. Now, John Shakespeare, William's father, owns the cottage as well as the family home. He was renting this cottage out. Property was one of John Shakespeare's many money-making activities. He's a very busy man, William Shakespeare's father. He's got all sorts of business interests on the go. Not all of them entirely legal by any means, but property was one of his perfectly legitimate little money earners. So he's renting the cottage out, and we now believe it is most likely that William Shakespeare, the man himself, actually lived here in the cottage when he first got married. Now, he's only 18 years old when he gets married, which actually was considered very, very young by the standard of that time for a middle-class boy like William Shakespeare to be getting married. Eyebrows would have been raised at William Shakespeare, Shakespeare's oldest son, getting married at the age of 18 in a bit of a hurry. In a lot of a hurry. They rush this marriage through. William Shakespeare doesn't have any way of supporting a new family of his own, and we think it's his father, John, who would basically have had to put a roof over the heads of William Shakespeare, his new wife, Anne Hathaway, and at least their first daughter, Susanna, we think would have been born here. So this is how you have to picture the start of William Shakespeare's adult life. At a later date, we know William Shakespeare's sister lived here, and that was when she'd grown up, got married, and had 4 children. So we know there were 6 of them at that point, living just in these 2 rooms. And this really gives you a much better idea of how many, many families would have lived at that time. The Shakespeares are prosperous middle class. They're doing rather well for themselves. Once you step through that gap in the wall, you're going back in time, over 400 years, and you see the house inside as it would have looked in William Shakespeare's childhood, when he's a boy of about 10 or 11 years old. It's the mid-1570s, and as I say, Shakespeare's doing rather well for themselves. First room of the house is the parlour, or the living room. Now that is their best room. That's where they would have entertained people. That's their opportunity to make sure you can see just how much money they can afford to spend. Something's never changed, you see, whatever century you're in. So what the Shakespeares do is put downstairs in the parlour the most expensive item of furniture they own, which was at that time a big bed. Now, beds in the 1570s are incredibly expensive. The wooden frame, the woven covers, luxury items. Only the prosperous middle classes upwards can afford beds. Everybody else sleeping on the floor, on a kind of straw mattress, a much cheaper alternative. So at that time, if you are lucky enough to be a member of the bed-owning classes, you put your most expensive bed downstairs so that everybody can see it. Because if you put all your beds upstairs, it's wasted, because only the family and the servants go up to the second floor. And in fact, I'm pointing on the wrong side of the house. You'll see when you go through, the best bed is over here, closest to the window, so that people can walk along Hen Street and have a look in and say to each other, did you see that bed the Shakespeares have got? Everybody's doing very well. So it's an enormous status symbol at that time. For us today, it's like owning a nice car. It is the 16th century BMW, as you're going to see in there, and quite a nice model. But the only people sleeping in it are the Shakespeare's visitors. It is strictly a guest bed. The family themselves would always be upstairs in the 3 separate bed chambers. So most of the time there's nobody in the best bed. It's very much just on display. Once you've gone through the parlour, past the best bed, you're then in what we would think of as the dining room. They would have called the hall. Very end of this floor, you're in the workshop. And that's where John Shakespeare, William's father, has his business. He is a glove maker by trade, which was a very good business to be in at that time. Seen as rather a high-class trade, but as I alluded to earlier, not quite enough for John Shakespeare. He is also an illegal wool dealer. He's a moneylender, and he's trading in grain and timber. He's got all these things on the go. But those activities do not prevent him from becoming mayor of Stratford. They might even have helped. We know what local politics is like. But even when he's no longer mayor, he holds other important offices in the town council, including at one point the position of ale taster. It wasn't all bad in the 16th century by any means, ladies and gentlemen. Now, everybody in Stratford would have known who John Shakespeare was. They would have known William Shakespeare as his oldest son. And I must just tell you, before you go through, the floor in the parlour that you're about to step onto, the stone floor of the first room, is the original stone floor of the house. At that time, you only had stone in your best room. The rest of the downstairs, this little cottage, you would have had an earth floor with straw or reeds on top of that, but the stone floor in the parlour is the one that was there when the Shakespeares themselves were living here. It's the right date, and you will be walking quite literally in William Shakespeare's footsteps. So do enjoy that moment, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed for listening. You're very kind. As you go through the house, there are other guides. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask. We've also got a few of our actors. Thank you very much, ladies. We've got a few actors wandering around from our in-house acting team, Shakespeare Loud, who'll be performing some spontaneous Shakespeare for your entertainment. So don't be afraid if anybody breaks into Shakespeare. They're fully trained actors. You'll be perfectly safe.
Well, thank you very much. That was really interesting. Nice. Thank you.
Yes, so this is the workshop. This is the room where Shakespeare will actually so we've made lots of different types, as you can see. So these ones are more for the richer men, these are for the gentlemen, and these would have been worn over the waist like this, and these would have been to show off just how wealthy and prosperous you were. These are made out of dog skin, believe it or not, so they would often use dog skin to be able to kind of just to kind of reflect kind of status and what kind of person they were. Other kinds of gloves are the more common types. A pair of those would cost you about 4 shillings a pair, so you only the kind of really rich people will be able to afford them. Gloves like these will cost you about 2 pence a pair, and the average working man probably earns around about a penny every week. So if he saved up for a couple of weeks, he could buy himself a this new pair of gloves. These gloves are your average kind of labourer's gloves, a very basic kind of stitch pattern throughout them. John Shakespeare himself would finish off the gloves, he would do the kind of final processing, but he left all of the real hard work to his apprentices. There would have been around about 4 or 5 guys in here who would have actually been helping him out and actually making a lot of the gloves as well. So you can see that wooden frame there at the back. When the leather hides have all been tanned, because there's also a tanner on site in the yard, all of the skins would first be delivered to the tanner. He would then smooth them out using manure and human urine. So you can imagine the kind of stench that got them on the bay through as well. Once all that was done, you'd then bring your skins into here. You'd scrape them, you'd finish them off using this glover's paring knife, which would be used like that. You'd hold it, you'd scrape it. And then you would you'd bring your gloves onto here, excuse me, and then you would basically finish them off. So you basically just kind of fashion them into your basic kind of glove shape. You put your hands over them. You might also have taken a measurement beforehand from the person to give you a bit of a rough idea of what to work with, and then you'd cut it out using the knives and the scissors, and then hopefully you would end up with something very similar to what we've got here in the front. And the apprentices would also be trained to embroider the gloves. Often they'd be threaded through with lots of different coloured silks and threads, with lots of reds and greens. These colours again will show off just how rich and wealthy you were. And then you would sell them from his window. You wouldn't actually have had to go out into the street to set up a separate market store, because in the 16th century, if your business was attached to your home, it was much wiser to actually kind of cut down on the cost. Oh, excuse me, and actually sell them from the window itself. He also made money purses. That's what those there on the left hand are on the rail. These would just hang down from the waist, and they often have a lot of metal work embroidered in them as well. So we think that a blacksmith might also have been on the site. John would have employed a couple of men to help him out with metalwork, and those again would hang from the waist on the belt with a little bit of string. So they're quite dangerous as well, quite open. So if you're in an open area, thieves will just kind of put their hands in and take your money, or they'll cut your string with a little bit of a little dagger, and then they'll run off down the street with your cash. So you have to be really, really careful. And then you've also got, on the other end of the rail, dagger sheaths. So the dagger sheaths would always be worn by men because they were essential for protection against thieves and murderers on the streets. But then if you went to somebody else's house for some kind of meal or a big banquet or a feast, you'd have to take your own cutlery along with you. So you'd take your knife with you, and you would also take a spoon along with you as well. No forks by this time. They came along just a little bit later after Shakespeare had died. They weren't very good anyway, because they were in kind of like 2 prongs. So. And then you've also got in this room a lot of whitewashed walls. Does anybody know why that is? Take a guess. They basically help to bring as much light into the room as possible. You'd have your candles, but the candles are often made out of animal kind of fat or animal tallow, which burns a lot quicker and easier than what wax does, and gives off a lot of smoke. So these rooms got to be quite suffocating. So if you could install these walls into your home, that would be a great way of just kind of generally lightening up the place as well. Great in the winter time, obviously, when it gets very, very dark. Very, very lovely. Okay guys, so if you would like to try on any of the gloves, please feel free to do so, and do ask me any other questions if you have anything else that you'd like to know.
Thank you.